Simultaneously an incredible big match worker and kind of a terrible television one. The undisputed star known as Charlotte Flair is perhaps the most unpredictable wrestler on any show she appears on. In the era of content super service, that's something of a gift really, but the latter dreadful displays do little to offset the criticism she often comes in for. Put simply, she's a mystery wrapped in an enigma. Which is perhaps why WWE want you to forget the following. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 things WWE wants you to forget about Charlotte Flair. Number 10, the Nia Jax shoot. A total disaster during Raw's big summer return to working in front of fans in 2021. The danger levels were set to high when a Nia Jax-Charlotte Flair match seemingly fell to pieces. Their scuffle on the August 30th edition of Monday Night Raw saw both women absolutely livid with each other following an apparent breakdown in communication. And it wasn't even just that things went awry and they didn't really do a particularly great job of masking them. There was seemingly a belief between the two that the harder they hit each other, or more they sandbag their opponents, the quicker things would sort themselves out. Baffling. After some hideous-looking and dangerous exchanges, wrestling is not supposed to be this real, folks. They were saved by the restrictions of television time, getting on the same page just enough for Jax to beat Flair and set up a title rematch the following week. Needless to say, the belt wasn't the hot topic when the bell rang for the rematch. Now I've got a quick question for you. What is your favorite Charlotte Flair in-ring performance? Probably not this Nia Jax one, but you let me know what yours is in the comment section below. Number 9. Flipping off the first crowd back. It took less than 5 minutes back in front of crowds for the Queen to let her subjects know what she really thought of them. Or at the very least, what she thought of them chanting for Becky Lynch during the opening moments of her Money in the Bank battle with Rhea Ripley. Giving the crowd a one-finger salute, Flair appeared in zero mood for their fun and games. But the very non-PG retort to their request turned out to be the best thing she could have done. An absolutely atrocious feud and unclear character motivations had rendered the Raw Women's Championship program with Rhea Ripley freezing cold on the night of WWE's first pay-per-view back in a full building, but Flair's flash of fury had a deranged and transformative effect on the potential hijackers. The gesture pulled focus back onto the war that was about to follow. By the time she'd secured yet another Raw Women's Championship victory, the audience were too in awe of what they'd just seen to make time for the man. Number 8, the Lacey Evans match. WWE should have no problem getting people to forget this. It was, after all, just an empty arena mid-card match, featuring a wrestler who's since been released after multiple attempts to get her over. It's unlikely many will ever go back and rewatch the good contest between these two, let alone the stinkers. And this encounter on the February 8, 2021 edition of Raw was a stinker. The encounter was almost destined to fail. They had almost no chemistry together. Flair was shaking off some post-return rust, and an angle implying the Queen's rank-old dad Rick was sleeping with the sassy Southern Belle after the shows weighed everything down with a gross sadness. A botched slap spot between the two was the most egregious example of nothing physically or mentally connecting. But it couldn't break the immersion because that had gone in the first few seconds. And it was at least the last in a crap series. Evans announced her pregnancy on air a week later, and everything, including anything Flair had on the docket for WrestleMania, came to an abrupt halt. Number 7, that Stephanie McMahon promo. Charlotte Flair was riding high a week removed from cutting a scathing promo on her father Rick back in the summer of 2016, brutally decrying his help and influence on her career before banishing him from her entourage entirely. The division's top heel and a fabulous and constantly improving wrestler, Flair had ascended to the point where eventual victory for Sasha Banks, or a fellow babyface over the malevolent title holder, was destined to be sweet, sweet solace. Slick Rick was, at this point, surplus to requirements. It's almost as if all of that was too good to be true. Stephanie McMahon, just 7 days after this mini milestone in the champion's career, rocked up and attempted to siphon all that heat for herself in one of the most spectacularly hypocritical misfires the company have ever scripted. Without a drop of irony, McMahon said how embarrassed she was to have Charlotte as champion, calling her spoiled, selfish, and self-important. Flair tried desperately to interject, presumably to highlight how mind-numbingly absurd that sounded coming from the woman born into the company, but as usual, Daddy's little girl trampled over any of that. She advised advised the most pushed woman on the roster to step back and shut her mouth, just to remind us all who the real dominant female was. Number 6. The Simone Biles promo. On July 29, 2021, Charlotte Flair quote-tweeted her support for Olympic gymnast Simone Biles after she elected to pull out of the competition for mental health reasons. The conversation around Biles' exit brought out the best and worst in folk. But when she thanked those that had supported her, Flair simply tweeted 3 emojis: goat, thanks, and love. It's important to note all this in advance of what followed on Monday Night Raw just days later. Addressing her listless Raw Women's Championship program with Nikki Ash, Flair said, "A few days ago, I woke up to a headline that said Simone Biles withdraws from Olympic Games. And I couldn't help but take a second to think to myself, why would the greatest gymnast of all time not want to go for the gold anymore? And later I discovered that it was for mental health concerns. The more I learned, the more I couldn't help but empathize with her. Now listen, I'm going somewhere with this. She was talking about Nikki Ash, illegitimately won. No, she stole my Raw Women's Championship. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't help but think to myself, what the hell is going on? I am near breaking point. I am going to have my own nervous breakdown." Whether scripted by writers or improvised by Flair, the whole thing was in rotten taste. Not only trivializing Biles' situation, but perhaps exposing how a case like this would be considered internally by the notoriously hard-nosed McMahon family should a wrestler experience it. Hey you! Yes, you sat learning about all the stuff WWE wants to forget about their queen. Cheers for spending some time with us today, and if you like what you see, why not tap that subscribe button, eh? Go on, you know you wanna. Number 5. The Paige promo. Horribly effective at causing needless offense, mostly because it would have been so simple to avoid. WWE's unnecessary cruelty was yet again laid bare in what proved to be one of the last ever feuds over the barely missed Divas Championship. Ahead of a Survivor Series 2015 clash with friend-turned-rival Paige, Charlotte Flair spoke at length about life as a wrestler's daughter, as well as mentioning her late brother Reed, who had tragically taken his own life 2 years earlier. The Queen suggested she would fight as her family always had. Then Paige replied, saying, "Your little baby brother didn't have much fight in him, did he?" It was a grim enough retort on the surface, but the darkest aspect revealed itself down the line, when reports emerged that the extended Flair family, including then WWE contracted star Rick, weren't given prior warning of the callous reminder of the 25-year-old's passing. This was truly abhorrent when it aired, and has predictably aged terribly too. Number 4. The Kairi Sane concussion. An excellent main event tainted by this and several other unnerving moments. The Kabuki Warriors versus Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair at tables, ladders, and chairs will forever be remembered for the concussion suffered by Kairi Sane, which is precisely why WWE want you to forget about it, either due to a breakdown in communication between the performers or the various planned details of the contest clouding judgment. The severity of Sane's head trauma wasn't made entirely clear, or certainly not clear enough. Flair's slap following a Welch spear is more brutal than the intended move, especially knowing Sane's plight. This isn't to suggest the Queen was careless, but that the anger in the moment was extremely misplaced. Wrestlers place so much trust in so many people just to even work a 2-minute squash on television, let alone an overloaded gimmick-heavy pay-per-view main event. That enough went wrong in the process to allow any of this to play out as it did left a black eye on WWE and Flair in particular. Number 3. Family infighting. So there's a lot to unpack here, and much of it has to do with a series of disputed personal conflicts between Flair, her ex-husband Ricky Johnson, father Rick, and on more than one occasion, the police. Arrests were made in 2008 when fights broke out between the three, but an already unpleasant story got uglier as more explanations came out in the aftermath. In a WWE-promoted co-autobiography with Rick in 2018, Flair spoke of the trauma she experienced in the marriage, noting that Johnson was physically and psychologically abusive and had lost jobs due to drug use. Johnson sued over the remarks, and with a lawsuit brought an allegation that the future multi-time women's champion was the aggressor in a physical and verbal tirade directed at the responding police officers, as well as disparaging and racist comments being directed at the Afro-American community in Chapel Hill. Johnson's evidence of this claim didn't surface, but WWE claimed the remarks were meritless, and all's gone quiet with the case since. Number 2. The Championship Exchange. WWE wanted you to forget this nightmarish segment seconds after it concluded, but in the aftermath of the apparent healing of the rift between longtime friends turned foes Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch, it speaks to an even more torrid time for the performers and promotion alike. When Adam Pearce forced the New Day and the Street Profits favorites to switch their doubles titles, so the straps matched the color schemes of the show in 2020. Both units looked like they were having the mickey taken out of them as a way to try and claw back a modicum of credibility. It was substantially harder to do that in this live setting, but WWE, a pre-booked work, insisted on this procedure instead of pre-booking title changes to avoid it. The fools. Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and Sonya Deville were all said to be fuming for a variety of reasons, with the latter two sick to the back teeth in particular of the problems they believe to have been caused by the Queen's unprofessionalism. But let's not pretend that a perfect version of this segment still wouldn't have been absolutely abysmal. It's annoying just to think about. No wonder everybody having to perform it got so irate too. That Lynch and Flair made amends neutralizes some of the hostilities on a rewatch, but Triple H would do well to never arrange one of these again. Number 1. The female Roman Reigns. A frankly ludicrous take for many reasons, but one that stuck all the same. WWE's booking of Flair for much of her first few years on the main roster resulted in a sizable portion of the audience likening her to the company's once most prominently pushed babyface. The reasonable comparisons were never the ones fans were making. She was a tremendous all-rounder, she radiated enormous star presence, and she made the talent she worked with look better even in defeat. Sadly for the Queen, she was racking up her early title reigns just as WWE entered the era of alienation. Never before had the company felt so at odds with so much of its core browbeaten base. As a perennially push-top star, Charlotte caught much of that flack. Ironically, even that was of a benefit to the company. Becky Lynch's attack on her following their SummerSlam 2018 Women's Championship match didn't register as a heel turn because the audience had made up their minds between the two long before the assault. Though the comparison has finally dissolved, the resentment remains. Both Flair and Reigns have morphed into different versions of themselves from the latter days of Vince McMahon's destructive booking, but any winning streaks will forever be deemed a fault of the booking rather than the credit of the performer. And if you enjoyed this video about things you didn't know about Charlotte Flair, you'll probably have some fun with this 10 things WWE wants you to forget about 2023 one too. Click on it and thank me later. Bye bye.